I stood in the doorway of my beach house, staring at furniture I did not recognize. The worn leather couch that had belonged to my grandmother was gone. The driftwood coffee table I had spent 3 weekends refinishing no longer sat in front of the windows overlooking the ocean. Instead, sleek white furniture filled the space, sterile and impersonal, like something from a design magazine that prioritized aesthetics over comfort. My sister Vanessa leaned against the kitchen counter, sipping wine from one of my glasses. She looked completely at ease, as if she owned the place. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a perfect ponytail, her linen dress crisp despite the humidity. She smiled when she saw me, the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes. Finally, she said, "I was wondering when you would get here. What do you think of the changes?" I walked further into the room, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. The walls had been repainted, the curtains were new. Even the rug was different. Everything that had made this house mine, everything that had carried memories of lazy Sunday mornings and quiet evenings, watching the sunset had been erased. "What happened to my furniture?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Vanessa waved a hand dismissively. "That old stuff. I donated most of it, some of it I just threw away. It was so dated, Brianna. This place needed a serious upgrade." My hands clenched into fists at my sides. I had bought this beach house 2 years ago with money I had saved from working as a marine biologist. Every piece of furniture had been chosen carefully, each item holding significance. The house was my sanctuary, the place I came to. And the demands of my research became overwhelming. "You had no right," I said quietly. Vanessa laughed, a sound that grated against my nerves. "Oh, come on, don't be so dramatic. I did you a favor. This place looks incredible now. You should be thanking me." I took a deep breath, trying to maintain control. "Why are you even here, Vanessa?" She set down her wine glass and crossed her arms. Eric and I needed a place to stay for a while. Our condo is being renovated. I remembered you mentioning that you hardly ever used this place during the summer because you were always out on research trips. So, I figured it was just sitting here empty. Might as well put it to use. "You could have asked," I said. "I didn't think it would be a big deal," she replied, her tone growing defensive. "We're family. Besides, you've been so busy lately. I could never get you on the phone." That was true. I had been leading a research expedition studying coral reef restoration off the coast of Hawaii for the past 6 weeks. Cell service had been spotty, and when I did have reception, I was usually too exhausted to do more than send quick text messages to let people know I was alive. But that didn't give Vanessa the right to move into my house without permission, and it certainly didn't give her the right to replace everything I owned. "Where is Derek?" I asked. "He went into town to get groceries," Vanessa said. "He should be back soon." "You'll stay for dinner, right?" I made reservations at that seafood place on the pier. I looked at her, this woman who had always taken what she wanted without considering anyone else. Growing up, Vanessa had been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. She was 3 years older than me, beautiful and charming, always knowing exactly what to say to get her way. I had spent my childhood in her shadow, working twice as hard for half the recognition. As adults, things had not changed much. Vanessa worked in public relations for a luxury hotel chain, a job that suited her perfectly. She was good at making things look better than they actually were. She had married Derek 4 years ago, a real estate developer who came from money and had never had to struggle for anything in his life. "I'm not staying for dinner," I said. "I need to see the rest of the house." I walked past her into the bedroom. My bed frame had been replaced with something modern and angular. The quilt my grandmother had made was gone. New lamps sat on new nightstands. In the bathroom, my toiletries had been moved to a cabinet under the sink, replaced by Vonesis. Expensive skincare products lined up on the counter. The guest room had been converted into a home office. Derek's laptop sat on a glass desk, papers scattered across the surface. I recognized blueprints for one of his development projects. When I returned to the living room, Vanessa was scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I entered. "Well," she asked, "isn't it amazing? I hired this interior designer, who specializes in coastal modern aesthetics. She did an incredible job." "How much did all of this cost?" I asked. Vanessa brightened, clearly mistaking my question for interest rather than barely contained fury. I forwarded you the invoice, $38,000. A steal, really, considering how much work needed to be done. You can just transfer the money whenever." I put it on my credit card for the points. My vision blurred for a moment. $38,000. She had spent $38,000 redecorating my house without asking, and she expected me to pay for it. You're insane, I said. Vanessa's expression hardened. Excuse me, you broke into my house, threw away my belongings, spent a fortune redecorating, and now you expect me to pay you back. That's insane. I didn't break in, Vanessa said coldly. I used the spare key from the lockbox, and I'm not asking you to pay me back. I'm asking you to pay for improvements to your own property, improvements that have significantly increased its value. By the way, I shot back. Improvements I never asked for. God, you're being so ungrateful, Vanessa said, her voice rising. I spent weeks planning this. I took time off work. I dealt with contractors and designers all so you could have a beautiful space to come home to. And this is the thanks I get. I stared at my sister, recognizing the pattern. This was what Vanessa did. She created chaos and then played the victim when people got upset. She had done it our entire lives, and I was done letting her get away with it. Get out, I said. Vanessa laughed, but there was no humor in it. This is ridiculous. Derek and I are staying here for at least another month. Our renovation isn't finished. I don't care, I said. This is my house. I want you out by tomorrow. Or what? Vanessa challenged. You'll call the police. Tell them your sister used a key you gave her access to. Good luck with that. She was right. Of course, the spare key was in a lockbox attached to the deck railing. I had put it there for emergencies, never imagining Vanessa would use it to move in without asking. Technically, she had not broken in. She had just massively overstepped every boundary that existed between us. I'll change the locks, I said. Fine, Vanessa replied. But you still owe me $38,000. I have the invoice, I have receipts for everything. You can try to fight it, but any judge will see that I improved your property. That makes you responsible for the debt. She picked up her wine glass and took another sip, completely calm now. She knew she had me cornered, or at least she thought she did. Vanessa had always been good at reading people, at knowing exactly which buttons to push. She had turned the situation around so that I was the unreasonable one, the ungrateful little sister who couldn't appreciate a kind gesture. But she had miscalculated this time. She had pushed too far. I pulled out my phone and opened the app connected to the security cameras I had installed 6 months ago. I had put them in after there had been a string of break-ins in the neighborhood. One camera covered the front entrance, another the back deck, and a third the living room. I had not checked the footage in weeks, but I checked it now. There it was, video of Vanessa letting herself in with the spare key. Video of her directing movers as they carried out my furniture, video of her laughing with the interior designer as they planned the transformation. Hours and hours of footage, all time-stamped, all indisputable proof that she had done this, without my knowledge or consent. I saved all the files to my cloud storage, then made a second copy and sent it to my email. Vanessa watched me, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. What are you doing? She asked. Protecting myself, I said. You might want to call Derek. Tell him to start packing. I left before she could respond, driving back to my apartment in Portland with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The beach house was 2 hours away, far enough that I couldn't visit as often as I wanted, but close enough to escape to when I needed solitude, or at least it had been. Now it felt tainted, contaminated by Vanessa's presence, and her complete disregard for my boundaries. When I got home, I sat down at my kitchen table, and went through my phone. I had 13 missed calls from Vanessa over the past 6 weeks. I had assumed they were her usual attempts to draw me into some drama or another. Now I realized she must have been calling to tell me about her plans for the beach house, plans I would have immediately shut down if I had answered. She had known I would say no, so she had done it anyway and asked for forgiveness later, except she wasn't even asking for forgiveness. She was demanding payment and acting like I was the problem for being upset. I opened my laptop and started researching lawyers. I needed someone who specialized in property law, someone who could help me navigate this situation. Vanessa was right that she had receipts and invoices, but she was wrong about what they proved. Those documents showed that she had made unauthorized changes to my property, changes I had never agreed to. That had to count for something. The next morning, I called a law firm downtown. The receptionist connected me with a lawyer named Gregory who listened patiently as I explained the situation. Do you have any proof that you did not authorize these changes? He asked when I finished. I have security camera footage, I said. It shows her letting herself in, directing the work, everything. There's no footage of her asking my permission because she never did. That's excellent, Gregory said. Email me the footage and any communication you have had with your sister about this. I will review everything and get back to you by the end of the week. I sent him the files, then tried to focus on work. I had reports to write from the Hawaii expedition, data to analyze, grants to apply for, but I couldn't concentrate. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that white furniture, that sterile space that used to be my sanctuary. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. You're being completely unreasonable. Call me so we can talk about this like adults. I deleted the message without responding. Another text came through an hour later. Derek and I have nowhere else to go. Our condo is uninhabitable right now. You're really going to make us homeless over this. I blocked her number. She started calling from Derek's phone. I blocked that too. Then she tried my work email. A long message about how I was ruining our relationship over something insignificant, how our parents would be disappointed in me, how I had always been oversensitive and dramatic. I archived the email without reading. The first paragraph. I knew Vanessa's tactics. She would try guilt, then anger, then play the victim. She would tell our parents her version of events, making herself the hero and me the villain. Our mother would call, concerned and confused, asking why I was being so difficult. Our father would stay silent, as he always did, letting Vanessa do whatever she wanted without consequence. But I was done caring about maintaining peace. Vanessa had crossed a line, and there had to be consequences. Gregory called me 3 days later with his assessment. You have a strong case, he said. Why? Our sister committed what is legally called trespass to chattels, which means she interfered with your personal property without authorization. The fact that she replaced your belongings without consent, even if her intention was to improve the space, does not give her the right to bill you for it. So, I don't have to pay her. I asked. Absolutely not, Gregory confirmed. In fact, you could potentially sue her for the value of the items she disposed of, plus damages for emotional distress, and the cost of returning the property to its original state, if you choose to do so. Relief flooded through me. What do I need to do? First, we sent her a cease and desist letter, Gregory explained. Make it clear that you never authorized these changes, that you will not be paying for them, and that she needs to vacate the property immediately. If she does not comply, we can move forward with a civil suit. Do it, I said. The letter was sent the next day via certified mail. I imagined Vanessa's face when she opened it, the shock and indignation she would feel at being called out legally. She was used to getting away with everything, used to people backing down rather than confronting her. She wouldn't be expecting this, but I was not backing down. Not anymore. While I waited for Vanessa's response, I drove back to the beach house. I wanted to document everything for the legal case, to take photographs of the changes she had made. I also wanted to check the security footage, again to make sure I had not missed anything. The house was empty when I arrived. Derek's car was gone from the driveway. Inside, the furniture remained, but their personal belongings had been cleared out. A note sat on the kitchen counter in Vanessa's handwriting. I can't believe you're doing this. You've always been jealous of me, and now you're using this as an excuse to hurt me. Derek and I moved to a hotel. I hope you're happy. You've officially destroyed our relationship. I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. Jealous? That was rich coming from someone who had just tried to steal $38,000 from me. I spent the afternoon going through every room, taking photographs, making notes. In the back of the bedroom closet, I found a box that Vanessa must have missed. Inside were some of my grandmother's belongings that had been on display in the living room, a collection of sea glass we had gathered together during summers at this very beach, a photograph of the two of us building sand castles when I was 6 years old, a small wooden whale my grandfather had carved. I sat on the floor holding these items, feeling the weight of what Vanessa had almost taken from me. These were not just things, they were memories, connections to people I loved, pieces of my history. And she had planned to throw them all away because they didn't fit her aesthetic vision. My phone rang. It was my mother. I considered not answering, but I knew she would just keep calling until I picked up. Brianna, she said when I answered, what's going on? Vanessa says you threatened her with a lawsuit. She moved into my beach house without permission and redecorated everything, I explained. Then she tried to make me pay for it. She was just trying to help, my mother said, her tone suggesting I was overreacting. She thought you would appreciate it. She threw away grandmother's furniture, I said. There was a pause. My mother had loved her mother deeply, and those pieces of furniture had been precious to her as well. She had given them to me when I bought the beach house, saying they belonged by the ocean where grandmother had been happiest. She didn't, my mother said, but her voice had lost its certainty. She did. She threw away almost everything. I found some items in a box in the closet, but the rest is gone. Another pause, longer this time. Let me talk to your father, my mother said finally. We'll figure this out. She hung up before I could respond. I knew what figure this out meant. My parents would try to mediate, to find some compromise that would keep everyone happy. They would ask me to drop the legal action, to be the bigger person, to forgive Vanessa because family was more important than furniture. But they were wrong. This was not about furniture. It was about respect, about boundaries, about not letting Vanessa steamroll over me anymore. I spent one more night at the beach house, sleeping in the guest room because I couldn't bring myself to use the bed Vanessa had chosen. The sound of waves crashing against the shore usually calmed me, but that night, I lay awake, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. Vanessa had always taken what she wanted. When we were children, she had taken my toys, my clothes, my friends. As teenagers, she had taken credit for my ideas, my accomplishments, my work. As adults, she had taken my time, my energy, my peace of mind. And I had let her, over and over again, because it was easier than fighting, because I wanted to keep the peace. Because I had been taught that good sisters supported each other no matter what. But there was a difference between support and being a doormat, between forgiveness and enabling bad behavior. And I was done being the person who always gave in, who always sacrificed, who always put Vanessa's comfort above my own well-being. The next morning, I locked up the beach house and drove back to Portland. Gregory had sent me an email with an update. Vanessa had responded to the cease and desist letter with her own lawyer, claiming that I had given her verbal permission to make improvements to the property and that I was now trying to back out of paying for them. It was a lie, of course, but it was a clever lie, one that would be difficult to disprove without concrete evidence. Verbal agreements were notoriously hard to enforce or refute in court. Except I had that evidence. I had the security footage showing that Vanessa had made these changes while I was out of the country, unreachable, with no way to give permission, even if I had wanted to. I had phone records showing that I had not answered any of her calls during the tea time period. I had text messages proving that she had never asked me directly about redecorating, never mentioned her plans, never sought my approval. Gregory was delighted when I explained all of this. This is going to be much easier than I thought, he said. Her lawyer is bluffing, hoping you'll settle out of court to avoid the hassle. But with this documentation, we can prove definitively that she is lying. What happens now? I asked. Now we wait, Gregory said. Her lawyer will review our evidence and realize they don't have a case. They will likely advise Vanessa to drop the demand for payment and hopefully apologize for the inconvenience. And if she doesn't, I pressed. Then we move forward with a civil suit, Gregory said calmly. We sue for the value of the disposed items, the emotional distress, and the cost of your legal fees. We might even pursue charges of theft or fraud, depending on how far she is willing to take this. I thought about that as I hung up the phone. Did I want to take this all the way to court? Did I want to put my family through a legal battle, to create a rift that might never heal? Yes, I did. Because some things were more important than keeping up appearances, or maintaining false harmony. 2 days later, my mother called again. This time, my father was on the line, too, which meant they had formed a united front. That was never a good sign. Brianna, my father said, his voice having that stern quality he used when he wanted to sound authoritative, though it had never worked particularly well on me. We need to talk about this situation with your sister. There's nothing to talk about, I said. Vanessa committed a crime. She's facing the consequences. A crime, my mother said, her voice pitching higher. Brianna, that's completely excessive. She's your sister. She made a mistake. You're blowing this way out of proportion. She threw away grandmother's furniture, I reminded them. She spent $38,000 without my permission. She moved into my house without asking. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern of behavior that has gone unchecked for too long. We raised you girls to support each other, my father said. Family comes first, always. I had heard this lecture before. Family comes first. Blood is thicker than water. Sisters should stick together. All the platitudes people use to justify bad behavior and enable toxic relationships. You tell Vanessa that family comes first when she was throwing away my belongings. I asked, did you tell her that when she tried to bill me for changes I never authorized? She thought she was helping. My mother insisted. No, I said firmly. She thought she could get away with it, because she always has, because you always take her side, because I'm expected to be understanding and forgiving while she's allowed to do whatever she wants. Silence on the other end of the line. I could picture them, in their living room, my mother on the couch, my father standing by the window, both of them trying to figure out how to manage this situation. What do you want us to say? My mother asked finally. I want you to acknowledge that what Vanessa did was wrong, I said. I want you to stop making excuses for her. I want you to understand that I'm not the problem here. Of course what she did was wrong, my father said, though he sounded reluctant to admit it, but taking her to court. Brianna, that's extreme. That will destroy this family. She destroyed it when she decided my property and my belongings meant nothing, I replied. I'm just making sure there are consequences. I hung up before they could argue further. My hands were shaking. Confronting my parents was almost harder than confronting Vanessa. They had spent decades mediating between us, always asking me to compromise, to bend, to accommodate. They had never asked Vanessa to do the same. The next week was a blur of legal preparations. Gregory compiled all the evidence, organized the timeline, prepared the case. He was confident we would win if it went to trial, but he also thought Vanessa would settle before it reached that point. People like your sister rarely want their behavior exposed in a public courtroom, he explained. When she realizes we have concrete evidence, she will probably offer a settlement. I was not sure about that. Vanessa hated being wrong even more than she hated losing. She might drag this out just to prove a point, just to make me suffer for daring to stand up to her. During this time, I buried myself in work. I had a presentation to give at a marine biology conference in Vancouver, a talk about the coral reef restoration project I had been leading. It was an important opportunity, a chance to secure funding for the next phase of research. I couldn't afford to be distracted by family drama. The conference was held at a hotel overlooking the harbor. I arrived 2 days early to prepare, rehearsing my presentation until I could deliver it flawlessly. On the day of the talk, I stood in front of a room full of scientists and researchers, presenting data and discussing methodologies, feeling like myself again for the first time in weeks. After the presentation, several people approached me with questions and interest in collaborating. One of them was a program director for a major environmental organization, someone who controlled significant RAISE/ERC grants. She liked my work and wanted to discuss potential funding opportunities over dinner. I should have been thrilled. This was exactly the kind of connection I needed to advance my career. But as we talked over grilled salmon and roasted vegetables, my mind kept drifting back to the beach house, to Vanessa, to the lawsuit that was slowly moving forward. Why? Oh, seemed distracted, the program director said. Her name was Helena, and she had a kind face and sharp eyes. I'm sorry, I said. I have some personal issues going on right now. Want to talk about it? She asked. I hesitated, then found myself telling her the whole story. It felt strange to confide in someone I had just met, but maybe that was why it was easier. Helena had no history with my family, no preconceived notions about who was right or wrong. When I finished, Helena shook her head. Your sister sounds like a piece of work. That's putting it mildly, I said. You're doing the right thing, Helena said firmly. People like that need to face consequences. Otherwise, they just keep hurting the people around them. It was validating to hear someone say that, someone who was not involved in the situation, someone who could look at it objectively. My parents thought I was being vindictive, Vanessa thought I was being ungrateful, but Helena saw it clearly. This was about setting boundaries and enforcing them. We talked for another hour, and by the end of the dinner, Helena had not only promised to support my research funding application, but had also become something of an ally. She gave me her card and told me to call if I needed anything, even if it was just someone to vent to about family drama. I flew back to Portland feeling slightly more grounded. The conference had reminded me that I had a life outside of this conflict with Vanessa, goals and ambitions that mattered more than furniture or family politics. But when I landed, there was a voicemail from Gregory. Call me as soon as you can. We have a development. I called him from the airport parking garage. What happened? Vanessa filed a countersuit, Gregory said. She's claiming that you agreed to let her stay at the beach house indefinitely, and that you promised to pay for any improvements she made. She's suing you for breach of contract and demanding not only the $38,000 for the renovations, but also an additional $20,000 in damages for emotional distress. I leaned against my car, feeling like the wind had been knocked out of me. She's suing me for emotional distress. Yes, Gregory said. Her claim is that your threats of legal action have caused her significant mental anguish and damaged her reputation. This is insane, I said. It's a nuisance suit, Gregory replied calmly. She's trying to intimidate you into backing down, but don't worry. We have more than enough evidence to defeat this. It might actually work in our favor, because now she has to defend her claims under oath. That was cold comfort. Vanessa had escalated the situation beyond anything I had anticipated. She was not just refusing to admit wrongdoing, she was actively attacking me, trying to make me the villain in a story where she was clearly at fault. I drove home and immediately started going through my files again, looking for anything that might support my case or refute hers. I found old emails between us, messages where I talked about visiting the beach house myself, plans I had made for decorating or repairs, nothing that suggested I had given her permission to move in or to make changes. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about the countersuit, about how much time and money this was going to cost, about how Vanessa had managed to turn a simple property dispute into a full-blown Liga L war. The next morning, I received an unexpected call from my grandmother's neighbor, a woman named Claire, who had lived next to my grandparents for 40 years. I had not spoken to her since my grandmother's funeral 3 years ago. Brianna, she said, her voice warm but concerned. I heard about what's happening with Vanessa and the beach house. I thought you should know something. What is it? I asked. After your grandmother passed, Vanessa came by the house several times, Claire explained. She took things, antiques and heirlooms. Your grandfather was still alive then, and he wasn't doing well mentally. He didn't really understand what she was taking. I tried to mention it to your parents, but they said Vanessa was just helping to clear out the house. My stomach dropped. What kinds of things did she take? Furniture mostly, some jewelry, a painting that had been in your grandmother's family for generations. I remember because your grandmother had promised that painting to you. She told me several times that when she died, you should have it because you were the one who really appreciated it. I closed my eyes, feeling sick. Do you know what Vanessa did with those items? I saw her, loading them into a truck, Claire said. He told me she was taking them to get them appraised, that she wanted to make sure they were properly valued for estate purposes. But I drove past an antique store a few weeks later and saw the painting in the window. I went in and asked about it, and the owner said someone had sold it to him recently. Did you tell my parents? I asked. I tried, Claire said, but your mother didn't want to hear it. She said I must have been mistaken, that Vanessa would never do something like that. I dropped it because I didn't want to cause problems, but now with everything happening, I thought you should know. After I hung up, I sat staring at the wall for a long time. Vanessa had not just taken my belongings, she had stolen from our grandmother's estate, selling family heirlooms for personal profit, and my parents had either not known, or had chosen to look the other way. I called Gregory and told him what Claire had said. This changes things, he said immediately. If we can prove that your sister has a pattern of taking and disposing of family property without authorization, it strengthens your case significantly. Can your grandmother's neighbor testify? I think so, I said. Let me ask her. Claire agreed without hesitation. Your grandmother loved you so much, she said. She would want you to stand up for yourself. With Claire's testimony secured, Gregory began building a more comprehensive case. We had evidence of Vanessa's pattern of behavior, proof that this was not an isolated incident but a recurring problem. We had documentation of the antiques she had taken, receipts from the antique store proving she had sold them. But gathering this evidence meant digging into painful family history, confronting truths that had been buried for years. It meant admitting that Vanessa was not just entitled or thoughtless, but actively manipulative and dishonest. My parents called again, this time angrier than before. How dare you drag Claire into this, my mother said. She's an old woman. You're putting her through unnecessary stress. Claire volunteered, I said. She wants to tell the truth about what Vanessa did. What Vanessa did? My father repeated. You're making your sister sound like a criminal. Maybe that's because she acted like one, I said. This has gone too far, my mother said, her voice breaking. You need to drop this lawsuit, Brianna. You're tearing this family apart. I'm not the one tearing it apart, I said quietly. Vanessa did that when she decided her wants were more important than anyone else's rights. I'm just refusing to pretend it's okay anymore. If you go through with this, there will be consequences, my father warned. Your mother and I will not be able to support you. You have never supported me, I said. Not when it mattered. Not when it meant standing up to Vanessa. I hung up and this time I blocked their numbers too. I was done being manipulated by people who prioritized comfort over truth, who valued the appearance of family unity more than actual justice. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Gregory prepared me for what to expect, the questions I would be asked, the way Vanessa's lawyer would try to discredit my testimony. He warned me that family lawsuits were emotionally draining, that Vanessa would likely try to make me look like the aggressor. Just stick to the facts, he advised. Do not let her bait you into an emotional response. Stay calm, stay focused, and tell the truth. The day of the hearing, I wore a simple navy dress and drove downtown to the courthouse. My heart was pounding as I walked through the metal detectors and up to the courtroom. Gregory met me outside looking professional in his suit and tie. Ready? He asked. As ready as I will ever be, I said. We entered the courtroom together. Vanessa was already there with her lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in an expensive suit. Vanessa was dressed impeccably as always, her hair styled, her makeup perfect. She looked calm and confident, every inch the wrong party. When she saw me, her expression hardened. There was no warmth, no recognition of our shared history, just cold calculation and barely concealed anger. The judge entered and we all stood. The proceeding began with opening statements. Vanessa's lawyer painted a picture of a generous sister who had tried to help, only to be met with ingratitude and legal threats. She claimed I had been difficult to reach, that Vanessa had made reasonable attempts to get my approval, that the renovations had been an act of kindness. Gregory countered with the fact. He presented the security footage, the timeline proving I had been out of the country, the lack of any written or verbal authorization. He introduced Clara's testimony about the stolen heirlooms, establishing a pattern of behavior. The judge listened carefully, taking notes. When both lawyers finished their opening statements, she looked between Vanessa and me. This is a family matter, she said. I strongly encourage both parties to consider mediation before we proceed to a full trial. These cases rarely end well for anyone involved. Vanessa's lawyer nodded. My client is open to mediation, Your Honor. Gregory looked at me. I shook my head slightly. My client would prefer to proceed with the case, he said. The judge sighed. Very well. We will schedule a trial date. In the meantime, I am ordering both parties to refrain from any contact with each other or any communication through intermediaries. Is that understood? We both agreed. As we left the courtroom, I felt Vanessa's eyes on me, but I did not look back. This was no longer about sisterhood or family loyalty. This was about holding someone accountable for their actions, regardless of our shared DNA. Over the next few weeks, I focused on building my life outside of the lawsuit. I threw myself into my work, spending long hours in the lab analyzing samples from the Hawaii expedition. The data was promising, showing measurable improvement in coral reef health using the restoration techniques we had developed. Helena from the environmental organization called to say my funding application had been approved. I would receive a substantial grant to continue the research enough to support a full team for the next 2 years. It was the kind of professional validation I had been working toward for my entire career. But even this success felt muted by the ongoing legal battle with Vanessa. The trial date was set for 6 weeks away, and Gregory was preparing aggressively. He had deposed several witnesses, including the interior designer Vanessa had hired and the antique store owner, who had bought my grandmother's painting. Their testimonies were damaging to Vanessa's case. The interior designer admitted that Vanessa had never mentioned getting my permission, that in fact, Vanessa had told her I was traveling and unavailable. The antique store owner confirmed he had purchased several items from Vanessa, items she had claimed were hers to sell. Gregory was confident we would win, but winning suddenly felt less important than it had at the beginning. I found myself thinking about what the judge had said about family matters rarely ending well. Even if I won in court, I would lose a sister. My relationship with my parents was already fractured, possibly beyond repair. Was it worth it? I called Helena one evening, needing someone to talk to who was not emotionally invested in the outcome. I keep wondering if I am making a mistake, I admitted. If I should just let this go and move on? Why would you think that? Helena asked. Because she is my sister, I said. Because my parents will never forgive me. Because I am tired of fighting. Helena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, can I tell you something? I had a sister too. She was manipulative and selfish, always taking advantage of people who loved her. I spent years making excuses for her, covering for her, bailing her out of problems she created. I thought that was what family meant. What happened? I asked. She took out credit cards in my name, Helena said. Destroyed my credit score, cost me a job opportunity because the background check showed all this debt I did not even know existed. And when I confronted her, she acted like I was overreacting, like I should just fix it and move on. Did you fix it? I asked. No, Helena said firmly. I pressed charges. She went to jail for fraud. My parents disowned me. They said I had betrayed the family. But you know what? I have never regretted it, because the moment I stopped enabling her behavior was the moment I got my life back. I absorbed this understanding what Helena was really saying. This was not about revenge. It was about self-respect. It was about refusing to be a victim anymore. Thank you, I said. You are going to be fine, Helena assured me. No matter what happens with the trial, you are going to be fine. The trial began on a Tuesday morning in early September. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, more intimate. Besides the judge, the lawyers, Vanessa, and me, there were only a handful of observers, court staff, and a stenographer. Gregory had prepared me well. I knew what to expect, how to answer questions, how to remain composed under cross-examination, but nothing could have prepared me for the emotional reality of sitting across from my sister in a courtroom telling a judge about all the ways she had hurt me. My testimony came first. Gregory walked me through the timeline. The discovery of the changed furniture, the invoice Vanessa had sent, the security footage proving I had not authorized the changes. I spoke calmly and clearly, keeping my emotions in check. Then, Vanessa's lawyer cross-examined me. She tried to suggest I had been negligent by not checking on the property more frequently, that I had been unreachable by choice rather than circumstance, that I had benefited from Vanessa's improvements, even if I did not appreciate them. I held my ground. I was leading a research expedition, I explained. I had limited communication, but that does not give anyone the right to enter my property and make unauthorized changes. But you gave your sister access to the spare key, the lawyer pressed. For emergencies, I clarified, not for moving in without permission. The lawyer tried several more angles, but Gregory objected when her questions became repetitive or irrelevant. Eventually, the judge sustained his objections and told her to move on. Vanessa took the stand next. She looked poised and confident, the picture of a concerned sister who had been misunderstood. She testified that she had tried repeatedly to reach me, that she had left voicemails explaining her plans, that she had assumed my silence meant consent. I thought I was doing something nice, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I wanted Brianna to come home to a beautiful space. I never imagined she would react this way. It was a good performance. She was convincing, sympathetic, the wrong party who had only tried to help. But then Gregory began his cross-examination and everything changed. You testified that you tried to reach your sister multiple times, he said. Can you provide specific dates and times of these attempted communications? Vanessa hesitated. I do not remember exactly. It was over several weeks. But you have phone records, correct? Gregory pressed. Records that would show these calls. I called from different phones, Vanessa said. Sometimes my cell, sometimes Derek's, sometimes my office. And yet none of these calls are documented in your phone records, Gregory said, holding up a file. We have subpoenaed your phone records as well as your husband's. There are no calls to your sister during the time period in question. Vanessa's face palled. I must have texted then. Show me the texts, Gregory said simply. She could not, of course, because they did not exist. Gregory methodically dismantled her testimony using the security footage, the timeline, the witness statements. He showed that Vanessa had not just been careless or presumptuous. She had been deliberately deceptive, acting without permission and then lying about it afterward. The final blow came when Gregory introduced evidence about the stolen heirlooms. Claire testified about seeing Vanessa remove items from our grandmother's house. The antique store owner testified about purchasing the painting. Gregory presented documentation showing that the painting had been specifically bequeathed to me in my grandmother's will, a fact Vanessa had conveniently ignored. By the time Gregory finished, Vanessa looked shaken. Her lawyer tried to recover during redirect, but the damage was done. The evidence was overwhelming. The judge called a recess to review the materials. We waited in the hallway for over an hour. Vanessa sat on a bench across from us, her lawyer speaking to her in low tones. She looked at me once, and I saw something I had never seen before in her eyes. Fear. When we returned to the courtroom, the judge delivered her ruling. Based on the evidence presented, I find that the defendant, Vanessa, entered the plaintiff's property without proper authorization and made substantial changes without consent. The claim that verbal permission was granted has been thoroughly refuted by documentary evidence and witness testimony. She continued, outlining her decision in detail. Vanessa was ordered to pay me the current market value of all disposed items estimated at $15,000. She was also ordered to cover my legal fees. Her counter-suit was dismissed entirely, but the judge was not finished. Furthermore, the evidence regarding items taken from the estate of the plaintiff's grandmother raises serious concerns about potential theft and fraud. I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for possible criminal investigation. Vanessa's face went white. Criminal investigation meant potential charges, a criminal record, consequences that would follow her for the rest of her life. The judge banged her gavel. This court is adjourned. The aftermath of the trial was surreal. I walked out of the courthouse feeling both vindicated and empty. I had won, proven my case beyond doubt, held Vanessa accountable. But the victory felt hollow, tinged with the sadness of knowing my family would never be the same. Gregory shook my hand on the courthouse steps. That went even better than expected. He said the criminal referral was a surprise, but given the evidence about the heirlooms, it makes sense. The district attorney will likely pursue charges. What does that mean for Vanessa? I asked. Depends on whether they can build a strong case. Gregory explained grand theft, fraud, potentially elder abuse. If they can prove your grandfather was not mentally competent when she took the items, she is looking at serious consequences. I nodded, trying to process this information. Part of me felt satisfied that Vanessa was finally facing real accountability, but another part, the part that still remembered building sandcastles with her as a child, felt a complicated mix of guilt and grief. Over the next few days, the reality of the situation settled in. Vanessa's countersuit had been dismissed, meaning she owed me money instead of the other way around. The judge had ordered her to pay $15,000 for the disposed items plus $12,000 in legal fees, $27,000 total, nearly as much as she had tried to charge me for the unwanted renovations. But more importantly, the criminal investigation was moving forward. The district attorney's office contacted me for a statement. They wanted to know everything about the heirlooms, about my grandfather's mental state when Vanessa had taken them, about any other instances where she might have taken property that did not belong to her. I told them everything about the painting my grandmother had promised me, about the antique furniture that had disappeared, about Clara's testimony and the antique store receipts. I laid out years of behavior, a pattern of entitlement and theft that had gone unchecked because she was family. The investigator assigned to the case was a woman named Patricia who had handled many elder abuse cases. She listened carefully, taking detailed notes. Your grandfather had dementia, she asked. Yes, I confirmed. He was diagnosed 2 years before he died. By the time Vanessa was taking things from the house, he could not even remember what he had eaten for breakfast. Patricia's expression hardened. That makes this worse. Taking advantage of someone with cognitive impairment is a serious crime. If we can prove she knew about his condition and took items, anyway, we are looking at felony charges. I had not considered it might be classified as elder abuse, but Patricia explained that in many jurisdictions, exploiting mentally incapacitated elderly people was treated as a particularly egregious crime, one that carried enhanced penalties. Will you testify if this goes to trial? Patricia asked. I thought about what that would mean. Standing in another courtroom, this time, criminal rather than civil, testifying against my own sister in a case that could send her to prison. My parents would never forgive me. I would become the family outcast, the one who betrayed blood loyalty. Yes, I said, I will testify. While the criminal investigation proceeded, I had to deal with the practical aftermath of the civil trial. Vanessa had 30 days to pay the judgment. Gregory advised me that she would probably try to appeal, but given the strength of the evidence, an appeal was unlikely to succeed. I used that time to visit the beach house and assess what I wanted to do with it. The white furniture Vanessa had chosen still filled the rooms, sterile and impersonal. I could not afford to replace everything immediately, but I could start reclaiming the space as mine. I moved the modern couch to the curb with a free sign. Within hours, someone had taken it. The glass coffee table went next, then the angular bed frame. I slowly emptied the house of Vanessa's choices, creating blank space that I could fill with my own selections over time. In my grandmother's old chest, I found more items that Vanessa had missed. Photographs from family vacations, my grandmother's recipe book filled with handwritten notes, a quilt she had been working on before she died, only half finished. I brought these treasures home and displayed them prominently. They were not worth money, but they were priceless to me. They were connections to a woman who had loved me unconditionally, who had seen value in me beyond what I could achieve or produce. I also changed the locks on the beach house and removed the spare key lockbox entirely. I installed additional security cameras, better ones with cloud backup and real-time alerts. No one would ever enter my property without permission again. 3 weeks after the trial, I received a call from Patricia. "We are moving forward with charges," she said. "Grand theft and exploitation of an elderly adult. Your sister has been formally indicted. The arraignment is next Tuesday." I did not attend the arraignment. I could not bring myself to watch Vanessa stand before a judge to enter a plea, but Gregory kept me informed. She had pleaded not guilty as expected and was released on bail. A trial date was set for 3 months later. My parents called me from an unknown number, having figured out I had blocked them. My father did most of the talking. "Your sister has been charged with a crime," he said, his voice tight with anger. "A crime because of you. Because of evidence I provided," I corrected, "evidence of things she actually did. She is your sister." My mother sobbed in the background. "How can you do this to her? How could she do it to grandmother?" I countered. "How could she steal from someone who loved her? How could she take advantage of grandfather when he was too sick to protect himself?" "People make mistakes," my father said. "This was not a mistake," I said firmly. "This was a choice, multiple choices over years, and now there are consequences." I hung up and blocked the new number. I was done explaining myself to people who refused to understand. The months leading up to Vanessa's criminal trial were strange. I tried to focus on my work to move forward with my life. The grant from Helena's organization had come through, and I was building a research team for the next phase of the Coral Reef Project. I hired 2 graduate students and a postdoctoral fellow, all brilliant minds excited about the work. We spent weeks preparing for the next expedition, planning logistics, coordinating with local conservation groups. It was good to have something positive to focus on, something that had nothing to do with family drama or legal battles. But I could not completely escape the situation. Patricia called regularly with updates. The prosecution had gathered extensive evidence, including testimony from other family members, who had noticed items going missing from my grandparents' house. They had financial records showing Vanessa had sold multiple heirlooms through various antique dealers, pocketing the proceeds. The defense was arguing that Vanessa had believed she had permission to take the items, that there had been a misunderstanding about estate distribution. But this argument was weak, especially given the existence of my grandmother's will, explicitly leaving certain items to specific people. Ignorance of a will is not a legal defense, Patricia explained, especially when that will was read to all family members during the estate settlement. She signed documents acknowledging she understood the distribution. She cannot now claim she did not know. As the trial date approached, I felt increasingly anxious. In the civil case, I had been a plaintiff fighting for my property rights. In this criminal case, I was a witness to my sister potentially going to prison. The stakes were much higher, and the emotional toll was heavier. Helena called me one evening to check in. We had become friends in the month since the conference, talking regularly about work and life. She was one of the few people who understood what I was going through. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "Honestly, not great," I admitted. "The criminal trial starts in 2 weeks, and I keep thinking about what it means. If she is convicted, she could go to prison." "Your sister in prison because she committed crimes?" Helena reminded me gently. "This is not your fault, Brianna. You did not make her steal from your grandparents. You did not make her lie about it. You just refused to help her cover it up." "I know," I said, "but it still feels awful." "That is because you are a good person," Helena said. "You care about people, even people who have hurt you. That is not a weakness, but it also does not mean you should let them escape consequences. The criminal trial began on a cold November morning. I had been subpoenaed as a witness, which meant I could not sit in the courtroom during other testimonies. I waited in a witness room, a small space with uncomfortable chairs and outdated magazines, trying not to think about what was happening down the hall. When my turn came to testify, I was nervous in a way I had not been during the civil trial. This felt more serious, more permanent. My words could help send Vanessa to prison. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Jessica, led me through my testimony. I explained my relationship with my grandmother, the items she had promised to leave me, the discovery that Vanessa had taken and sold them. I described visiting my grandfather during his illness, seeing the house slowly emptied of valuable antiques. Did your grandfather give your sister permission to take these items? Jessica asked. No, I said. He was not mentally capable of making those decisions. He had advanced dementia. He could not remember family members' names, or recognize his own house. And was your sister aware of his condition? Jessica pressed. Yes, I confirmed. She visited him regularly. She knew exactly how impaired he was. During cross-examination, Vanessa's defense attorney tried to suggest I was exaggerating my grandfather's condition, that perhaps he had been lucid during the times Vanessa visited. But medical records backed up my testimony. Multiple doctors had documented his cognitive decline, noting that he required constant supervision and was unable to make informed decisions about his property. Why? The defense attorney also tried to suggest I was motivated by greed, that I was angry Vanessa had taken items I wanted for myself. But this argument fell flat when Jessica introduced evidence of all the items Vanessa had sold, showing she had profited significantly while telling the family she was helping to clear out the house. Other witnesses testified as well. Claire described watching Vanessa load furniture into a truck. The antique dealer explained the transactions, producing receipts and photographs of items Vanessa had sold. An estate lawyer testified about the will reading, confirming that Vanessa had been present and had acknowledged understanding which items went to whom. The evidence was overwhelming, just as it had been in the civil trial. But watching it unfold in a criminal courtroom felt different. Every piece of evidence brought Vanessa closer to a conviction, closer to real punishment. I did not see Vanessa during my testimony. Witnesses were kept separate, but I imagined her, sitting at the defense table wearing another expensive outfit, probably looking composed and innocent. She had always been good at appearances. The trial lasted 5 days. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before reaching a verdict. I was at the lab when Patricia called with the news. Guilty, she said. On all counts. I sat down heavily, feeling a wave of conflicting emotions, relief, sadness, vindication, grief. What happens now? Sentencing is in 3 weeks, Patricia explained. The judge will consider the nature of the crimes, her lack of prior criminal record, and the impact on the victims. She is looking at anywhere from probation to 5 years in prison. 5 years. I tried to imagine Vanessa in prison for 5 years. I could not picture it. She had always been so concerned with appearances, so careful about her image. Prison would destroy everything she had built. But she had done this to herself. I had not forced her to steal. I had not made her lie. I had simply refused to be complicit in covering up her crimes. The sentencing hearing was brief. The judge heard statements from the prosecution and defense. Vanessa's lawyer argued for probation, claiming she had made mistakes but was fundamentally a good person, who deserved a second chance. The prosecutor countered that Vanessa had shown no remorse, that she had tried to blame others for her actions, that she had exploited a vulnerable elder man for personal profit. She argued for the maximum sentence. The judge split the difference. Vanessa was sentenced to 2 years in prison followed by 3 years of probation. She was also ordered to pay restitution for all stolen items, an amount that totaled over $60,000 when everything was calculated. Vanessa sat motionless as the sentence was read, her face pale but expressionless. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she stood slowly. For a moment, I thought she might finally apologize, might show some recognition of the harm she had caused. Instead, she turned and looked directly at me. Our eyes met across the courtroom. I hope you are happy, she said, her voice cold and clear. You got what you wanted. You destroyed me. The judge banged her gavel. That is enough. Officers, please escort the defendant. 2 bailiffs approached Vanessa. She allowed them to handcuff her without resistance, still staring at me with that cold, accusatory look. As they led her away, I felt nothing, no satisfaction, no guilt, no triumph, just exhaustion. I left the courtroom and walked out into bright afternoon sunlight. Gregory met me on the steps. "You did the right thing," he said. "Did I?" I asked. "Yes," he said firmly. "You protected yourself and honored your grandmother's wishes. What Vanessa did was wrong. The justice system agreed. That matters." I drove home slowly, thinking about everything that had happened. In less than a year, I had gone from discovering my beach house redecorated to watching my sister sentenced to prison. My family was fractured, probably beyond repair. My parents had made their choice, siding with Vanessa despite the evidence of her crimes. But I had also gained things: self-respect, boundaries, the knowledge that I could stand up for myself even when it was hard, even when it cost me relationships I had once valued. Helena called that evening. "I heard about the sentencing," she said. "How are you feeling?" "Empty," I admitted. "Like I won the battle, but lost something important in the process." "You lost the illusion of family," Helena said. "But illusions are not real. What you have now is truth. And truth, even painful truth, is better than comfortable lies." Over the next few weeks, I slowly rebuilt my life. I focused on work, leading my research team through preparations for the upcoming expedition. We were scheduled to spend 3 months in the Philippines, working with local marine biologists to implement reef restoration techniques. I also spent time at the beach house, slowly furnishing it with pieces I chose myself, nothing expensive or fancy, just comfortable furniture that suited my taste. I hung my grandmother's photographs on the walls. I displayed the sea glass collection we had gathered together. I made the space mine again. My parents never reached out. I heard through extended family that they had taken out a second mortgage on their house to help pay Vanessa's restitution. They were visiting her in prison regularly, supporting her through her appeals process, still convinced that somehow I was the villain in this story. It hurt, but I had expected it. Some people would never see Vanessa for who she really was. They would always make excuses, always find ways to blame others for her choices. I had coffee with Claire one Saturday morning. She was the one family connection I had maintained, the one person who had been willing to tell the truth even when it was uncomfortable. "Your grandmother would be proud of you," Claire said. "He always said you had steel in your spine." She was right, I said. "I miss her." "She knew," Claire replied. "She knew exactly who Vanessa was. That is why she was so specific in her will. She wanted to make sure you got the things that mattered, the things Vanessa could not be trusted with." That thought comforted me. My grandmother had seen the truth and had tried to protect me from it. By fighting for my inheritance, I had honored her wishes and her memory. 6 months after Vanessa's sentencing, I was in the Philippines leading the research expedition when I received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a check for $27,000, the amount Vanessa owed from the civil judgment. A note was attached in handwriting I did not recognize. "This payment is made on behalf of Vanessa to satisfy the civil judgment. Please consider the matter closed." No apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just money, and a request to move on. I deposited the check and used part of the money to commission a local craftsman to recreate my grandmother's driftwood coffee table from photographs. The rest I donated to a marine conservation charity in my grandmother's name. The work in the Philippines was transformative. I spent 3 months diving, researching, teaching local communities about reef conservation. The coral restoration project was succeeding beyond our projections. We were making a real difference, helping to heal ecosystems that had been damaged by climate change and human activity. It reminded me why I had chosen this career, why I loved this work. I was contributing something meaningful to the world, something that would outlast family drama and legal battles. When I returned to Portland, I found a letter waiting for me from the prison. It was from Vanessa. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was short, written in her neat handwriting. "Brianna, I have had a lot of time to think about what happened. The therapist here says I need to take accountability, so here it is. I was wrong. I should not have taken your things or grandmother's things. I should not have moved into your beach house. I thought I was entitled to do whatever I wanted because we were family. I thought you would just go along with it like you always did. I am sorry. I do not expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I did. Vanessa." I read the letter 3 times. It sounded genuine, more honest than anything Vanessa had ever said to me, but I did not know if I believed it. People in prison often said whatever they thought would help them, whether they meant it or not. I put the letter in a drawer and did not respond. Maybe someday I would be ready to forgive. Maybe someday we could rebuild some kind of relationship, but not now. Not yet. For now, I was content with the life I had built. My career was thriving. I had good friends like Helena, who understood and supported me. I had my beach house back, filled with memories and meaning. I had proven to myself that I could stand up to bullies even when those bullies were family. The path forward was uncertain. I did not know if I would ever reconcile with my parents, or if Vanessa would truly change, but I knew I had done the right thing. I had refused to be a victim. I had held someone accountable for their actions. I had chosen truth over comfortably. And in the end, that was enough. Vanessa served 18 months before being released on parole. She lost her job in public relations, her reputation destroyed by the criminal conviction. Derek divorced her 6 months into her sentence, and willing to stand by someone who had proven to be a liar and a thief. She moved into a small apartment and took a job as an administrative assistant, a far cry from the glamorous life she had once led. Her social circle evaporated as word spread about her crimes. The friends who had once envied her lifestyle now avoided her, uncomfortable with the truth of who she really was. She would spend years rebuilding, trying to prove she had changed, carrying the weight of her choices like chains she could never fully remove. My parents eventually had to sell their house to cover their debts, moving into a smaller place and living with the consequences of enabling Vanessa for so long. I stood on the deck of my beach house one evening, watching the sunset over the ocean, and thought about how far I had come. I had learned that love without boundaries was not really love, that family loyalty should not mean accepting abuse, that standing up for myself was not selfish but necessary. The journey had been painful, but it had also been freeing. I was no longer the person who stayed silent, who accommodated, who sacrificed my own well-being for the illusion of peace. I was stronger now, clearer about my worth and my limits. And as I watched the waves roll in, steady and eternal, I knew I had finally learned to choose myself. Revenge, I had discovered, was not about destroying someone else, but about refusing to let them destroy